What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Macy's daddy, Mike G, Shelly, Port Wolf, Hen Ross, Sid, Joseph. What is going on, guys? James, welcome and happy Wednesday. Happy May the 4th to all the Star Wars hardcores out there. So yeah, today I figured do kind of just a random Q&A. These ones are kind of fun to do once in a while. So if you guys have any specific questions, feel free to fire them at me. I was talking to a few people earlier, so they already have a few questions. But yeah, if you got more, for sure, shoot. Appreciate the show. Thanks, Bruno. Yes, May the 4th. It is definitely a good day. What about me? What's going on, Barry? All right, so Port Wolf was asking, how do you normally travel with a large amount of cash you're planning to make purchases at Reefapalooza, etc.? I can't say I've carried enough cash that I've been worried about it, but usually there's a nice roll in the pocket for the frag splurges. Yeah, personally, I don't do anything special for that. My bigger concern is normally about keeping the frags alive and getting them home. Especially if you're flying, you got to take that into account. Now, if you're driving, obviously a little easier, you can have a cooler or something. If you're flying back with frags, I know in the US they want you to have it in your carry-on bag, so that's one of the big things to consider. They tend to not be as picky with the water volume in the States. In Canada, they're very sticklers on that 100 ml of water, so little pea cups work well. But the other option is too, a lot of times you can get the vendors to ship them back for you, and then you just don't necessarily have to worry about it. So, especially if you get someone a ton of stuff from a single vendor, then they're probably going to help you out that way. Dun, dun, dun. Adam Moore hanging in there, added a bunch of fish to the 220, some biota pink, anthias, and marine beta. Oh, very cool. Marine betas are cool looking fish. Anthias are awesome too. Good choice on those ones. What's going on, Daily Reefing? Long time no see, Jeff. Hopefully your big tank's getting scaped and coming along well. Are there any corals that you think just look good under whites as good as they do actinics? Example, strawberry shortcake. Yeah, a lot of the like pinky and blue corals, actually blue corals is one. Under white lights or lighter lights, a lot of the blue corals look awesome where they're a lot more muted and they don't have that pop under the blues. So I think anything blue shines more under white light with just a bit of actinic. I think it's a good way to go. Strawberry shortcake, yeah, that's always a good one. Any millie, I like the big shaggy polyps, like Hellfire millie, that one's starting to look really good. Macy's daddy, ever had a red coral turn greenish? Usually if a red coral starts to turn green, it's not getting enough light. Either that's been my experience. There's also generally if it's too high in nutrients, sometimes that can cause it to go more pale, but yeah, usually green means it wants more light. Adam Moore, Garf Bonsai, Milka Style look amazing under whites. Yes, they do, definitely. Those are awesome ones. Garf Bonsai is a classic too. That one's beautiful regardless. What's going on, Greg? Devin, your DIY videos are amazing. Thank you. Can you show us how to make your DIY CO2 scrubber using BRS media reactor? Yeah, that probably wouldn't be too hard to do. Mine is super simple. The one I put on top of the water box is literally a dollar store container sitting on top of my skimmer lid, and I drilled a bunch of holes in the lid of the container, which is upside down. So basically the skimmer air flows up through the media, and I just drilled a hole in the side and basically use that as a recirculating. Super duper simple, works very, very well. Now if you wanted to do it with a BRS or like one of the reactors, you'd probably want to drill a little hole in your lid and then just suck the air out of there and run it through the reactor and then back into it. That's kind of what I would do in that situation. Gregory, hey Dev, how quick will acros start to soak up elk and calcium if you add a bunch at once, 6+ frags? Now that one is hard to quantify. Some corals you add and they'll start growing and they'll be happy right away. Now there's other corals where they'll do absolutely nothing for months and then one day they'll start to take off. So it's kind of one of those things of when the coral's happy and when it settles in, and it's really hard to quantify that because every coral is different, every tank is different. But yeah, honestly the only way you're going to know is by testing and monitoring it. But I've literally had some frags, you know, you put it in, you know, you can notice growth a week later. I've other ones that's been like 6 months and nothing, and then finally it's like it just starts to crust everywhere and grow. It's weird. It takes time to settle in before it starts to take off. Matt, hope all is well, mate. What's going on, Matt? Can you ask a question? I treat myself a dosetronic and alkatronic. Nice. Do you use the ODA, and what does ODA do? Sorry. Okay, so there's ODA and SDA. Now this is for the alkatronic and the dosetronic, and that's how it adjusts your schedule for you. So SDA is selective dosing adjustment, where it might just up, you know, maybe this chunk of the day. ODA will up your whole schedule for all. So if you're dosing, you know, 10 mils a day and sees your elks dropping, maybe it'll update it up it to like 12 mils or 13 mils a day. And that will up all your doses equally, or SDA might only up certain ones. I personally just use ODA, so it just ups the whole schedule. Oh, and I'll be ordering my first custom tank soon and can't decide whether to go with 24 or 30 inches. My current one is 25 inches wide. If you have the space, do 30. That front to back depth is super cool. I would definitely recommend that. So yeah, I would totally do 30 if I had the chance and you have the space. Is it worth it for Opti-White glass? Opti-White, is that Aquaforest tank, or is that, what's the other one called? But yeah, basically the high clarity glass. If you have the option, it would be sweet. Let's write it down a smidge. Any updates on your pH journey since the new Calcster? Oh, I do have some actually. Do I have an easy way to share this one? So my pH was super high and magical, and then my pH tanked, and I thought it was what I was messing with my schedule, so I changed a bunch of things. I realized that I just accidentally unplugged my skimmer, but look how amazing it was for... I'll get her back up there, but... So up until I unplugged my skimmer, that was a high of 8.36. And the low for that like week or so was 8.29 to 8.36. That was absolutely amazing. I adjusted and tweaked a bunch of stuff in my schedule, and all of a sudden my pH tanked, and I was like, oh, what the heck? Is it because I stopped dosing calc just at night? And I changed everything back, and the next day I realized I replaced the BNC cable on the alkatronic to the apex, and I knocked the power wire out of the skimmer, so that's why it tanked, because I had no air exchange for that night. So I just changed it back, so hopefully it'll go back up there in the next couple days. But what I've been doing most recently, I was dosing calc just at night, so mainly lights out, so it starts in the evening and then kind of turns off in the morning. And then the other thing I tried doing is turning the skimmer, or not the skimmer, the calcium reactor off at night, so it runs mainly in the daytime. So they're kind of going back and forth, and I was basically trying to add the extra pH boosting when my pH is normally lower to kind of counteract and balance it out. And then most recently, what I've been playing with the last week or two is the trident controlled dosing, which I've been telling you to dose elk, which I'm dosing the Brightwell 8.3 alkaline 8.3p, the one that boosts your pH more. I've been dosing that one again in the dip. So I've been trying to do all these mad scientists in the balance of all the different things, trying to like take full advantage and get the pH up there. So that's what I've been playing with the last couple weeks. The Reef Farmer. What do you think about using specialty Refugium lighting, Kessel, Tuna Floor, Apex Grow? They're mostly blue-red LEDs with white light. Yep. You can use anything you want for Refugium within reason. I mean, the red and blue work, the purple work. I have the Prime Fuge on mine. That one works awesome. You can use a white light bulb. It's all going to grow. The ones that are dedicated proper grow lights will grow better because it's putting more energy into the spectrums that the algae is utilizing. It's not saying the other ones won't work, but you're just wasting more energy into spectrums that aren't necessarily helping it grow. But you know, you can throw a T5 bulb, you can throw whatever you want, they're all going to grow. The dedicated grow lights will just grow better, or likely more, so it depends. But yeah, definitely I think it's worth it. Venturi on my skimmer gets clogged up within a month. Any suggestions? Easy fix is just run more water through it. I have personally not really had that issue with it clogging up. Some people say it's from precipitates. I don't know why I've never had it, but I've never had mine clog up. Matt, yeah, ODA, definitely use that one. What's up, Queen City Reefs? What's up, Marcus Partwolf? Gregory, is Ecotech planning on building a controller like Neptune anytime soon? My speculation would be that Ecotech and Neptune products will start playing nicer together since they're kind of sister companies now. So Ecotech already has Mobius, which is kind of like having a controller without actually buying a controller, because everything just programs and talks to each other and does stuff. Now, it would be cool if they started getting some more like sensor inputs, or, you know, like a power bar or some things so that you could control stuff based on that. Now, that being said, that might happen, or I think they might integrate more with the Apex stuff since they're now like sister companies. So it's kind of a toss-up 50-50, but I speculate one of the two will happen in the next year or two. So we'll see. So Ecotech is owned by Neptune. So Ecotech isn't owned by Neptune, but they have the same parent company. So they're kind of like sister companies. So neither of them own each other, but they're more like, yeah, sister companies is probably the best way to put it. Manny's Reef, do you feel like you need natural supplemental light to your radions to help with shadowing? If you have newer radions, I'm gonna say G4 started to be pretty good. G5 started to be really good at it. They have phenomenal spread. Like it's literally like the light is like just sideways and down. Like they have amazing spread for shadowing. So I don't think so. I do have reef rates on this. They're not even turned on right now, but I do have them for that purpose. But honestly, if you have G5s, I think the spread on them is amazing, especially have a couple of them, because that overlap gives you a ton of light. Just got the Vector S2 secondhand. Any reason to calibrate it? Tried another. You don't really need to calibrate it. The only reason I'd say you need to calibrate it is if you want to use the feed mode, because the calibrating sets how much water is like just enough to hold it in the pipe. So it's kind of like having a check valve in a way. So when you hit the feed mode, it's going to slow it down to holding water in the pump, so it doesn't back feed back in your sump, and they'll just hold the water there. So if you're using it as a return pump and the feed mode, then I'd say yes, calibrate it, just because it's a cool feature. Adam Moore, what are you using to control phosphates on your different systems? On the water box, I have the Refugium, which is this Chaeto, and that is lit by a prime fuge. And I also run a bit of RoaPhos in a reactor just to knock it down a bit when required. This tank, I did on the previous tank, I had a turf scrubber on it. I don't have it yet. That will probably end up back on there eventually, but for now I just have a bit of RoaPhos in a reactor. So GFO basically. Just connect my AI primes and Neros to Mobius. Oh, wicked, Bruno. That is actually still on my to-do list. I have a Nero in this sump for the frags in the bottom, and I have a small Nero in my water box sump. And that's for when I drip calc and everything in there, just to mix it all up. So hopefully that all gets mixed in pretty soon. Bruno, having a drink with you? Cheers, buddy. Love the channel, Devin. Thank you. Question, I put a calcster on my tank and went great for 2 months, cleaned it for a second time, now the saturation will not stay up. First question, what calcster do you have? Now, I probably clean mine every 4 to 6 weeks, and every week or two I'll add like a quarter scoop. Like I'll add just a little top off scoop just to like freshen up and boost it up a little bit. I haven't bothered doing this, but you could add either a pH probe into it to see the pH and see when it starts to drop. And when you start to see it drop, just add a little more calc. But I just kind of got in the habit of just adding a little like quarter cup every couple weeks just to freshen it up more or less. And that's worked really well, so I haven't even bothered the pH probe route, but I might eventually. Tony, ReefDudes, starting out, would you recommend... Okay, starting out SPS, what would you recommend to start with? Thanks, Tony. So, starter SPS, you want hardy things, right? If you're your first ones. What's super hardy in this tank? Montiporus Stiletta. That guy is super shaggy, super hardy. If you can find that one, it grows really well. Really cool polyp, so I would find that. I'd go with that one. Or if you can find like a purple bonsai, that's, for me, those have been pretty hardy over the years. They do really well. Monty caps generally are pretty hardy. They suck a lot of calcium. I do caution you though, they can overtake and grow too much. I used to have tons of Monty. Now the only one I keep now for like the plating ones is the grafted one. Marcus, I did see AI used to be with Mobius now. Pretty cool. Yeah, so they've kind of had some of those features way back when. So I've been beta testing Mobius since like way back when. So I played with it for a while. Yeah, it's really cool. Now all these features are out into the public, kind of mainstream, which is awesome. Okay, so Port Wolf, can Apex Hydros or GHL output the parameter graph data to a website for display? Natively, they don't necessarily output from their ecosystem officially. Unofficially, I mean, Hydros has its own web interface, Apex has its own, GHL has its own. I don't know if any of them have a public API. I have seen people make custom apps that pull from like Apex.local and some other stuff. So they don't natively do it, but I'm sure there's possible if you're a bit crafty with programming. Queen Cedar Reefs, how are you liking the Trident so far, and how does it compare to other testers you've had? So far so good, actually. My only complaint would just be like the reagent is a little more expensive, but it is pretty simple. It was by far, like, it was easier to set up than the Alcatronic was. It is much more like plug and play, user friendly to get started. Now I have the Alcatronic and the Apex on my tank, which yes, feels a little bit overkill, but it's pretty awesome to have two because it's good to like compare the two. So for instance, like I got it tuned fairly good now. So if you look at my last test, that shows up. So 8.03 from the Trident and 8.08 from the Alcatronic. So the Trident's testing every 6 hours and the Alcatronic is either 8 hours, I believe, 8 or 12. So overall, I mean, they're pretty dang close. It's like 0.5 to 0.1 DKH away from each other. So I mean, close enough for me. And they're consistently the same amount. So I'm pretty happy with that. I did add a bunch of like motorcycle side redundancies to it. So like if it's, you know, the elk is above 9, turn off my calc and my calcium reactor. And I told it to if either tester's above it. So I built a bunch of redundancies in. So that's kind of the one cool thing about having the dual testers. But a little bit overkill, but it's kind of fun. The Trident controlled dosing's the main thing I'm playing with now, letting it tweak it based on my trends. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Jeffrey, have a pH probe now. The pH will not go above 9. Was a constant. Oh, you're talking about the calc reactor. So I would probably just recalibrate your pH probe. It's possible it's either buggered up or it needs to be cleaned and recalibrated. Calc is hard on the probe, so they definitely do. Like button. Always appreciate it, guys. If you enjoy it, smash the like button. Jeff, Green Slimer. That is another great one. It's fairly fast growing. It's pretty darn hardy. It's been around forever. Green Slimer's, and it's like a beautiful coral. That's an awesome one to recommend for new tank. Marcus, excited for the Hana Magnesium check when it comes on sale. Should be good. Thoughts on recent details about Vibrant battling GHA tanks 5 and boom. Okay. So the big thing with Vibrant was basically lying on the bottle or not being truthful about what's inside of it. Now, I guess apparently it's more of an algicide and not necessarily bacteria like they claimed it to be. I've used it. I have not had any issues with it. I used it to kill bubble algae years ago, and it worked for that, right? I didn't really have any negative side effects from it. So regardless of if the label is truthful or not, in my experience, it worked. And if it worked before, it's still the same product inside of it, I'm sure. So, I mean, it worked for the one time I used it, I had a good experience with it. Some people's mixed opinions, but regardless of what the sticker says, it worked to get rid of a bubble algae farm. It took about 6 weeks. So use at your own judgment. But there you go. Cole, what's up? I use Alpha Reef, notice my DKH rising to high levels. So I'm curious the best strategy to bring it back down. Should I decrease the frequency or dose amount daily? Now, if your elk is too high, I would just stop dosing for a couple days, let it drop naturally. Then after that, just lower your dose a bit. If you're dosing 5 mils a day, drop it down to like 3 mils a day or 4 mils and go from there. Tony, why did my elk be rising from 9.4 to 14.7? My top off water is measuring 10.4. I don't dose anything. Oh, that's some crazy high elk. It's possible your source water just has high alkalinity in it from something. So there you go. You could add in some corals to suck it up, but if your source water has alkalinity in it, there's not really not much else you can do other than let it be consumed. Shirmy's Reef, what's going on? Nice hat. Why, thank you for noticing. So Ryan made me some wicked ReefDudes hats. and I love them, so thank you for watching, Ryan. Hey buddy, what filters for RODI, sediment, carbon, and DI? So basically most of them, you basically have your sediment first, and then it'll go into a carbon filter, and then from there it goes through your membrane, and now for reef tanks it would go into deionizing resin after that. So that's kind of your little bluey beads afterwards that it runs through. Love the green slimer. There's a guy near me that has reverse engineered the trident to make his own now. Nice. I actually saw the other day someone made like a mini trident. They 3D printed a little case and made it way smaller, which was kind of funky. Blair, recommendations on a powerhead for 25-gallon cube, thinking ice cap or AI Nero. Mixed reef is the goal. For a 25-gallon, I would probably do a Nero 3. They're super tiny, they work well. I used to use a Nero 5 in my old 20-gallon, and it was super overkill, but you could turn it way down. So honestly, I would probably use a Nero 3, and if you can, put it on the back wall, blend it in, and it's tons of power for that little tiny pump. DJ Mike Fury, have you tried Red Sea Mag test on the Mastertronic? Jonas mentioned the baseline. No baseline needed now, but my Mastertronic seems to need a baseline readout when it's above 150 off. I do use the Red Sea inside of mine. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to double check what it says. So on the water box, my last reading from the Mastertronic, whenever it loads, is 1150. So that is low, and the Trident says 13. So there is a bit of a discrepancy there. So good question. I do have to double check that one. Jeff, thank you for the $1.09 super chat. Audio is clicking in and out. Hopefully it's not too bad. But audio is choppy here too. Oh, hopefully it's not on my side. Could be the YouTube's. Okay, some other people said it's not there, so audio is fine. So it's probably just the YouTube buffering or internet connection. Refresh, audio fixed. Wicked. Awesome. He makes his own reagents. Oh, own reagents. I actually saw a website that sells a reagent that didn't actually say Trident on it, but it was basically Trident looking bottles. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be knockoff ones. It'd be interesting to know what the reagent mix is. Like I know there's DIY Alcatronic ones, so I'm sure there'll be other brands of DIY reagents in the near future. Are true depth 1 micron sediment filters a good idea to use on a quarantine tank? And would they function better than UV? So that is a very good question. Technically, I believe something like ick is larger than 1 micron. So in theory, they would be filtered out. Now, is it better than UV? I have no idea. That's a really good question. But if you could, one, you'd probably have to change the filters a lot. That depends what's in the water. But it is kind of a cool idea to think to trap them with the sediment filter. I've never tried it, but I like it. Someone should try this. Let me know. Or just use both. Then you're double good. Who makes the most reliable dosing pump? What should I avoid or potentially look for? Okay, dosing pumps. Depends what you're dosing. Like the cheapest dosing pump is something like the good old Jabo, which is like $100 for 4 heads. Super cheap, not super precise. You can go to something like, I would say probably, I haven't used the Red Sea one, so I can't really comment on that. For like accurate, more reliable ones, I'd probably say Camor, the Dose, or the Versas. Those are the 3 I would look at. If you're doing continuous duty stuff like a calc reactor or calcium reactor, I would look at either the Versa or the Camor. If you're using it for just dosing large volumes, again, you could use a Jabo or whatever you want. But if you're doing more accurate stuff like trace elements or smaller stuff, then Dose or Versa would probably be the 2 I'd go for. Any experience with Setosa? I think I almost killed mine, but coloration's coming back. I do. I actually have a nice big orange one. You don't see it much. It's in the water box tank, but it's on the stair side, so it's kind of high up in the back corner. So it's a bit harder to get to, so you don't really see it. But yeah, Setosa, I've had that one for ages. It's bright, it's colorful, it's a good staple. Cody Spencer, do you recommend hard plumbing your submerged return pump for the bulkhead using salt tubing? So I've done both. The tank behind me is hard plumb from the return pump all the way back up to the return. In my water box, I have it hard plumb to the sump, and then sump to the pump is silicone, so it has a little bit of like vibration. Now I am using the vectors, so they don't really vibrate much, so it's kind of overkill. But if you are using a DC or like a bigger pump that was a bit louder, the silicone would dampen it. Where if you're using a very quiet DC pump, it's probably less of an issue because it doesn't really have much vibration anyways. So it definitely doesn't hurt, but kind of depends on what you're using for pump. Have you ever used Brightwell Aquatics NO3 brick to lower nitrates? I do. I have one in the tank behind me. They can definitely help, actually. Interestingly enough, when I had this tank, I had low nitrates, so I was dosing the neonitro to the tank to boost up my nitrates, trying to correct it for a dino. And I actually removed a few of the bricks and put them in the other tank because I have higher nitrates in the other tank. So I was swapping some of the bricks around tank to tank to balance out the nitrate load. But I also had like copious amounts of media in this one to basically take care of and deal with when I change all the rock. So yep, definitely use the nitrate media bricks and they do work pretty well. Heather, what's your favorite tank brand? About 75 to 100 gallons at a decent price. So favorite and decent price are two different things. I really do like my water box. Not the cheapest tank, but really nice tank. Water box, Red Sea, they're both beautiful tanks. Innovative Marine is probably a better price point, I believe. But yeah, so favorite new Red Sea G2. Honestly, Red Sea and water box are the main two I look at. Innovative Marine's again, another one. I haven't had a big tank from them. I've only had smaller tanks from them. I have a small filtration chamber in my 25 AIO with my heaters. Would you recommend Refugium basket? Okay, in a 25 gallon, I have done small Refugiums. I think it's questionable how much they actually help. Same with the skimmer. Most of the nano skimmers aren't the best. Like, they'll do stuff, but is it really doing that much for you? I honestly have always questioned that. I don't think they do a ton. If you want to be a person, DJ Mike Fury, what reference solution do you use for your Mastertronic? BRS recommends the DRS solution, Fauna Marine. I actually went to go buy the Fauna Marine one the other day and it was sold out. So when it's in stock, I'm probably going to buy it and check it. So I haven't even referenced solution mine. I'm just more or less trusting it. When I do an ICP test, sometimes I'll just like note what my last test was when I do a water sample and then compare them. And it's been close enough. Like it's not exactly, but again, that water's been in the mail for a few weeks, right? But it's always been close, so I haven't fully worried about it. But at some point, I will, whenever it's in stock and I do an order, I'm gonna get it. Now the other thing is too, if you're looking at auto testers, you know, you got precision and you have accuracy. Now, if my elk is 8, my elk tester's telling me it's 8.3, and it's always 0.3 off, at the end of the day, that it doesn't really matter. Like, that exact number doesn't matter that much. What matters is that it's consistently off, right? So that's kind of why I haven't worried too much about running reference solutions through it, because as long as it's consistently giving me the same result, then I can see, are my parameters going up or down? Is it stable? That's really what matters, right? Like, your calcium could be 350, it could be 450, you know, your elk could be 7, it could be 11. Either one can grow coral, but not having crazy swings and having things be stable is what's going to keep it happier overall. Brinks, do you dose minor trace elements? Yes, I do. And how much? And do you stop dosing at all? All right. So I have the Brightwell, the broad spectrum trace on a doser. I have the Chaeto Grow on a doser. And I have, what's the third one? Short answer, yes. I do my broad spectrum dosing through the Brightwell additives. And then I tweak them using the Reef Moonshiners one. So I have a bit of a hybrid approach. I was slacking for a while. I was really good at it. Tank was looking amazing. I ran out of some stuff. I quit dosing them for ages. Now, with dosing trace elements, you don't have to dose them. It's like your corals will be like 90% of there without them. But if with dosing them, it's kind of like you want that extra like 5 or 10%. You want that extra bit of vibrance, that extra bit of color out of them. And that's kind of what I notice when you do dose them and they adapt to it and they get happy. Now, how much do I dose? So you can't really go off how much I dose because every tank is going to be different. And again, if you are going to go down the trace element and try and dial them in, that's something where you want to do an ICP test every once in a while, every few months, and just see where your levels are. And if you're dosing too much, it tells you to lower it, or you're highly depleted in something. Like, my fluoride was super low, so I've been dosing the fluoride. So I've kind of just been tweaking it, and every like 3 or 4 months, I'm just gonna probably do an ICP test and then tweak from there. I started doing trace elements on both tanks, so I'm kind of see how that goes for the next little while. Cody, thanks, Stephen. One more question. Do you prefer a threaded or slip bulkheads in an overflow box? I generally use slip. Sorry. I tend to use slip inside of the overflow box. Outside, I usually just glue it. But if I want something removable, I'd probably do thread on the outside, but I just use slip inside, so it's pressure fitted in. And if it leaked a little bit, doesn't matter. It's full water anyways, so I use slip. Reef Farmer, do you dose iron supplements? Yes, I do. And if you have a Refugium or an algae church scrubber, it will eat up your iron over time. And if you're run out of iron in your water, you'll notice that your Refugium growth will be stunted and it's not pulling out as much nutrients as it could be. So if you have a Refugium, I definitely recommend dosing iron. What are ways to increase nitrates aside from adding a nitrate supplement? Does food add nitrates? Yes, it does. Most foods add more phosphate than nitrate, for sure. The easiest way is to dose nitrates directly. Like in this tank, when I was trying to get rid of the dinos, I was dosing neonitro, so I'm basically dosing nitrates directly. Another way for nitrates, fish poop, add more fish to your tank. But yeah, or just dose it directly. Some people have dosed stuff like stump removers, different things. I find that a bit sketchier. Like, I generally would rather just pay a little more and buy something made for fish tanks and not something for killing stumps, but personal preference. When you were treating for dinos, what temp did you run the tank for and how long? I did not even touch the temp, so it's whatever my normal temperature is, which is probably like 78, 79-ish. Let me just look at the GHL and see what it's at. So I just left it at whatever it was at. What you drinking? This one is, it's like a sour beer. Tried the other day, it's pretty good. Just refilled it. Refilled the keg. Frag tank. I'm going for 78, 79. Somewhere in that range for my temperature wise. Really wish Canada had better availability of products like Beerus does in the States. Yeah, it is always a bit of a mix here. I've ordered a bunch of stuff from the States just because sometimes it's the only option. But paying the duty can suck at times. 76.8, there you go. So I'm running on the tank behind me right now. Port Wolf, what nutrients can be tested and cannot be tested at home without having to resort to ICP? That's a good question, man. There's a bunch of test kits you can get. Some of them are harder to find. Like, there's a lot of tests, like, even for the Mastertronic, they have tests for potassium and stuff, but I can't find them in Canada, so it depends. Depends what test kits you have available. Brinks, thank you for the $5 super chat. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to do some digging. I can't rattle off all the test kits off the top of my head. I did an ICP test first before dosing. However, since I started dosing minor trace elements last month, 1.2 mils a day, my corals are looking way better. I find, like, once you get your trace elements dialed in, it's like stuff will look good before, but it just looks like more vibrant, or you pull a bit more color out of it. Like, it's hard to explain it. Like, you don't need to dose trace elements, but if your tank is happy, things are thriving, you want that extra little bit, that's how you can really pull it out, is by dialing in all the trace elements. Still waiting for my ICP test to come back. It's been 3 weeks. Yeah, it's usually a good 3 weeks for me by the time I send it off to get my results. Sean, so I have a question on dosing, figuring out what to dose. I got Aquaforce component 1, 2, 3. Should I stop dosing all day to figure out the consumption? Okay, so in your case, Sean, test at pick a time. So pick noon, test your parameters, wait 24 hours, test the next day at noon, test your parameters. If the number is the exact same as the day before, like for instance, if you have 8.3 elk, wait 24 hours, test again, 8.3 elk again, you know your dosing is like spot on. So if you want, you can stop dosing to your consumption, but honestly, test and see what you're doing. If you're trending upwards, dose less. If your numbers are dropping, dose more. And just tweak it like that. That's a really easy way to do it. So if you want to stop dosing, you can figure your consumption, but I find it just as easy just to tweak your dosing. Sean, yeah, so Aquaforce component 1, 2, 3. I did use the pro version of that one before and it worked pretty well. That was, again, the ones that more boost your pH and stuff, but yeah, no, it definitely worked well. All right, Port Wolf, on larger tanks above 300 gallons, what's the best method to design a light rack in an enclosed canopy? If you have a permanent canopy, I mean, honestly, you could just screw them. It depends. Easy, simple, cheapest way, I mean, it's a wood canopy, I'm assuming. You could just screw them out your lights directly to the top of the canopy, right? Now, again, it partially depends the height of your water to the lights and kind of what's recommended. Or you could use a hanging kit and just screw into the top and hang your lights from the top of the canopy. That's probably, again, potentially the cheapest one. Or, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of the light mounts. This is the Ecotech one. On my other tank, I used extruded aluminum, made my own. Extruded aluminum is kind of like Big Kid Lego. You can build whatever you want out of it. Super cool stuff. So if I wanted to build a custom rack, I'd probably do the extruded aluminum route, just because it's so flexible. So Heath, a 36-inch hybrid fixture, 2 primes. If I upgrade to a 4-foot tank, would it be enough light spread, or would you add another prime? I would add another prime for a 4-foot tank. In my experience, okay, now it also depends on what type of coral you have. If you have soft corals, 2 is probably enough. If you're doing more of a mixed reef, I would probably do 3. I kind of find the primes are prime for about roughly 18 by 18 inch cube. So every 18 inches or so, I would add another prime personally for a more of a mixed reef. Now again, if you got zoas and softies, not a big deal, right? But if you want to mix encrusting corals or higher light corals in there, then add another one anyways. Just Nano Reefs. When moving my reef tank, what do you recommend I do? I have a 2-inch sand bed that's about 2 years old. Regular cleaning, sand, water change. I was thinking to replace the sand. I would personally replace the sand. Sand is full of all kinds of nasty fish poop and all that stuff that builds up. If you were to move it, if you go stir up the sand, you're likely gonna have a big cloud of nastiness come out, and that's gonna be all kinds of stuff you don't want to move into your new tank. Now, if you want to reuse your sand, basically suck it all out, put in some 5-gallon buckets, put the garden hose in there all the way to the bottom, and just run it for half an hour, and you'll see all the crap basically percolate up and overflow out of the bucket. And it will honestly take 20-30 minutes for that to go clear, or longer. Now, in that case, I would say you can reuse the sand. It's clean, it's kind of freshened up. However, you've also killed off all the good bacteria. So at that point, you're hey, you might as well put in new sand. And then if you want, clean it afterwards to reuse for future. But no, I always laugh at the term when it's new sand or used sand. All sand is used. Sand is not new. It came from the ocean somewhere, right? Been around for bazillion years, but it's clean sand. So use clean sand. That's what we'll go with. AJ, what do you suggest I put in the back chambers of my 30-liter all-in-one? I have Kato, but it's not really sure my micro skimmers do anything like you said. Fish softies more than anything. In the back chamber, man, just use a bag of Chemi Pure Blue. That's probably honestly all you need. Do a bag of Chemi Pure, which is going to work on phosphates and polishing your water. Above it, put a little chunk of either filter floss, or if you go to fabric store, you can buy big sheets of that stuff for quilts, which is basically a pad of filter stuff. That's what I used to do. Just cut a little rectangle out, put on the top, polish your water. Super duper easy, super low maintenance. Do a bucket water change every week or 2. Super easy tank. You'll be happy. Port Wolf, feel like we're playing a drinking game. I see you take those swigs to my questions. My throat's dry right now. Spring allergies should get me. Sulfur dioxide. So I know you were asking earlier about a sulfur denitrator. I have personally not used one. I had a buddy that used one. So my very limited knowledge of them, they will remove nitrates, which is kind of like their main thing, like a sulfur denitrator. And but you have to run very slow, continuous flow through it. And it takes like a few weeks for it to build up the bacteria to start doing its thing. And after that, it does amazingly at polishing the nitrates out of your water that runs through it. Now, the danger is if your power's out for a while and all of a sudden that water is going to become like, I don't know if it's anoxic or whatever it does, but you do not want to pump that water back in your tank after it's been sitting. That's like the nasty death stuff. So there's a caveat of that one. But that's about my limited knowledge of them because I haven't personally used one yet. Dark reef. Some of my SPS have started getting some brown goo. It's easy to come off when I blow it with a turkey baster. Is due to nutrients. If there is bubbles in your brown goo, it is possible that it is dinos. So, but that's likely on your sand, your rocks, and other parts of your tank. So it depends. Generally, the corals themselves don't do brown goo. If an acro is going to release something, it's usually more of like a clear or like a milky slime coat, which they'll do is like they're stressed or if they're out of water, or they're trying to shut off something. The reef farmer. Are you using trident controlled dosing? I have started to. So calcium reactor and calc are like my bulk dosing, and then I've told the trident to do about 30 mils a day on top of that, and I told it. So what I'm playing with now is seeing if there's a difference between, okay, over the 24 hours, dose that amount, or if I pick like, okay, these 12 hours when my elk is the lowest, then dose it during that. So I've been playing with that a little bit, but yeah, I'm definitely experimenting with the trident controlled dosing. It'll probably be a video in a few weeks, but I'm still experimenting before I do that one. Uptown Reefer. Have you considered bare bottom in your display? I noticed you have sand in your newest lagoon. I do have sand. I actually had bare bottom before in the same tank, but honestly, I just like sand better. I think it looks better. I like that natural look. My only complaint, at least in the shallow tank, is I get a few bare spots where the MP40 hits the glass, so every once in a while I'll push it back. But I might strategically to see if I can mount a rock or two and build a little brim or something to stop the sand from moving in those two spots. But yeah, I just like sand. I know I could crank the flow without it. We'll see, but for now it stays. Jordan, kind of want to get into calc, but don't have a doser. Do you really? Don't really want to use my ATO either. Is it dumb to do a little bit manually every day? It's not dumb, it's just work. So you can pre-mix a big batch of calc and drip it in. Like that's as cheap as it gets free way. Take like a gallon container, mix in some calc, let it dissolve, and just drip that to your tank. Like you could do that instead of an ATO. The only downfall is you would have to make it every day or two, right? So it's just a lot of work. Reactor and or doser just saves you all that effort of maintaining it. Like essentially that's what you wanted with like the calc reactor. Its big thing is it just saves you doing that work. Now, if you are maximizing how much calc you're dosing, like if you have enough of demand, like I barely use my auto top off anymore. Like I'll kick it on for like 5 minutes every like week or two just to balance stuff out. But I am dosing basically as much as I'm evaporating. So my ATO pump is turned off for the most part. Unless I want to just do a quick little tweak here and there. Be honest, have you scratched your water block display yet? It seems inevitable. I do have a scratch and it does taunt me. Haunts my dreams. But it wasn't from sand. It was from a freaking snail on top of my glass scraper. So I have not got a sand scratch. The one, and you don't see it standing up or looking straight. It's only if you're down low looking up about it, but there is one there and it was literally like, I'm 90% sure it was from a snail on the edge of my scraper. Yes, makes me sad. One Ogo 125 gallons saltwater fish only. Want to have a mixed reef. So what's a good budget light for a mixed reef? Find a good deal on a used light if you want a good budget one. I would personally want to have, I would get a decent quality light, but just buy one that's like a generation old, and just see what you're trying to wick a deal on. Please make a video of tuning the calcium reactor with just the CO2 regulator, how to set up the pH stuff. All right, I can do an updated, either live stream maybe next week, or maybe I'll do a video on it, but I'll do one in the near future of a calcium reactor. They're pretty easy. Quick rundown. You can basically tweak it how much elk you're doing, either by how much you're dosing from it, so your effluent, which is the name of the water that's coming out of it, or you can do it by the pH. So carbon dose is pricey. It is pricey. I would say you're going to have better, if I could only have one, I would pick a continuous duty pump over a carbon doser. Now, it is wicked to have both because it keeps it super stable. Now, also, if you have an aquarium controller that will turn the solenoid on and off, you don't really need a carbon doser, because your controller is keeping it within that range, right, with the pH probe. Now, if you don't have a controller, then a carbon doser has more value. I mean, if you have control on a carbon doser, I mean, you're just pimping it out. But for the most part, if you have a pH probe controlling the solenoid, then I think just a continuous duty pump is your biggest thing. Then you're like, oh, I need a little more elk, just up at a couple mils a minute more. Like, super easy to adjust on that one. I dose elk in calcium, 26 mils, 2-part calc at 2 mil a minute, and I have a balance at 8.5. Nice. Now, it is kind of interesting when you mix all these different methods. Like, to me, it feels like some days I'm like, do I overcomplicate this? And other days I'm like, oh, I have so much redundancy. If one method fails, I got another method. So it's kind of funny, but I like to tweak a lot. So some of the stuff I do is excessive and overkill. So just remember that. I just experiment a lot. I have fun doing it. So a lot of people say they still dose 2-part with Kalkwasser. Does this make sense? I'm confused. All right, Chili Willy Reef. So Kalkwasser, if you have a low demand tank, you can do everything with Kalkwasser. Like, I might be able to get away with this tank with just kelp right now. Now, eventually, there's going to come that point when kelp will no longer keep up. Now, kelp alone wouldn't be able to keep up with my water box. Now, with kelp, you can only dissolve so much into the water at once, and you can only dose as much as you evaporate. Now, once you hit that point, you're just going to be raising your water level and messing with your salinity. So that's why calc has a limit, because it's basically, you can only add as much RO water as you evaporate. So if you're looking at 2-part or calcium reactor or other methods, it's because you've exceeded what calc can handle for your system. Now, if you wanted to, you could, like Chummingham's Reef, he has a giant fans on his tank to force more evaporation so that he can dose more calc. So, I mean, there is ways around it, but that's kind of like your limiting factor is your evaporation rate. All right, what's your top tangs that you'd recommend? Because I want a purple tang. People say the tang is very aggressive and hyper. I have a purple tang. I would say he's fine. But again, it all depends on the fish, right? I've had some fish that have been awesome and some fish that have been punks, right? And same type of fish, and every fish is its own little personality. So it's, in general, I mean, I would say my yellow tang, I had one yellow tang and he was way more of a jerk than any other tang I've ever had. So it really depends on the temperament of the fish. Halifax, what fish/invert do you find consumes the most algae? So, okay, what type of algae, first of all? Now, for inverts, I like, if it was hair algae, turf algae, I would say urchins do the best job. If it's just general, like sandbed algae, then I really like the fighting conch snails. Those guys are awesome little cleaners. If it's algae on your rocks and whatnot, I mean, either an urgent or a small tang. Recently, I don't know if you can see him somewhere in there, I got a little whitetail bristle-tooth tang. A little super little tiny guy, and he's constantly grazing at the rocks, like he's doing awesome. Fellow reefer, sulfur nitrate is amazing, and I use one, and you don't need to allow it to cycle for weeks. and monitor the fluent coming to the reactor, and increase the flow depending on where you want your tank and to be at. Nice. Now I know I did a stream with Richard from Reefs way back when, and he had a sulfur denitrator, which is basically like a little sump that you add water into it. You drip in ethanol, I believe it was, and had a power head in it, mixes in it, and basically that stripped out all the nitrates, and you do a water change out of there back in your sump. And that worked amazingly well, but I have not personally dabbled in that realm myself. Okay, Brinks, I was dosing 56 ml of 2-part before Kalkwasser. Oh yeah, so you toned it way down. Fellow Reefer, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Port Wolf, you're going to need to magically refilling the glass for the stream. I know it's getting low. I can't go too late today because I do have to take the kid to an appointment in a bit. I know, should plan better for that one. 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. Yeah, so if you are mixing up calc, that's roughly what dissolves into it. It's a tablespoon per gallon-ish. Now the advantage of using a calc reactor is that you have it takes up much less space. You added, a couple cups of calc for it, and it keeps mixing it into your RODI water. So one way to do it is just pump your ATO through it, and some do that, so it just doses every time your auto top off comes on. Or use a continuous duty pump and you do it at a more controlled rate. So those are kind of a couple different methods. Kevin Jones, thoughts on using GFO to reduce my phosphates? My tank has been around 0.35 for a while. Whew, that's high. Really high. Okay, so personally, I like to keep phosphates less than 0.09. So 0.35 is crazy. In your case, I don't know how big your tank is, but I would kind of just do a big water change or two because you're going to use a lot of GFO to get that down. If you have a sand bed, I would just give it a really good vacuum. Use that as an excuse to do a good water change, and that's going to remove some of the stuff that is helping to add to your phosphates. Knock it down a bit. Then a more reasonable range, then I would use GFO, just because you're going to use a lot of GFO to suck that up initially. Now, GFO is phenomenal at removing phosphates. Phenomenal. Now, 2 things. You don't want to drop your phosphates too fast because you don't want to shock anything. If they've been up high, they've been up there for a while, then you want to remove it slowly. So, some sand bed vacuumings or some water changes, that is something to consider. Or again, you'll probably use more GFO, but you could absolutely do a GFO. Now, if you're doing it with GFO, make sure you don't... Greg, your phosphates are 0.4 to 0.5? My gosh. Oh, scares me. Now, it is possible to strip all of your phosphates out of the water with GFO. And in my early days of reefing, I made that mistake, and I lost some SPS. Some of them paled, some of them perished on me, and it's because I was starving them because of no phosphates, because I was using GFO too aggressively. So eventually, you just want to make sure GFO is an amazing tool. Just don't overdo it, and don't bottom out your phosphates, because then you're just opening up new problems. Born to be a shooter, am I crazy? There's a lot more people with brown jelly in the euphilia recently. Seems like something's changing in the industry. I wouldn't say there's much more. I'd say it's about standard issue. Sometimes it just randomly happens. There's probably some type of bacterial infection. But yeah, that's a good question. There was somebody I was talking that had some like KFC dip or Ninja, I can't remember what his name is. Let's talk on my Instagram. Anyways, I may have him on for a future stream because he supposedly has some dips that are working pretty well against the good old brown jelly battle and helping stop it and prevent it. I want to try and build the infinite water change unit you made with the extra canister filter. Do you still use yours to change the filter? I have really been slacking on water changes lately, so I haven't used it recently. Now, if you're dealing with a lot of phosphates, I would not use that. If you're doing it just for cleaning your sand bed, then that works well for that. So once it's running, it's a little... Okay, so with that project, it was a little bit of a pain to prime it at first, but once the water's flowing through it, it worked phenomenal. But just getting the air bubbles out the first time. Now, if I was to build it again, I would use a smaller tube and not my ridiculously large one, because I know it would be a lot easier to flush it out and prime it. But it worked really well once it was running. But yeah, I'd use a smaller tube, just use a normal one, then build it, and it should eliminate that issue. add fish again. Okay, so Heath, I've been battling ick, lost my too many. Sorry to hear about that. What are options for getting the tank back to where I can add fish? So in theory, if there's no fish in the tank, running that 78 days or whatever it was without fish would get you there, because the ick would die off without a host. I mean, putting UV on a tank will help kill it a bit quicker. If you do have fish in the tank, those are the kind of things I would look at. Rolling in super late. What's going on, Robbie? No UV killing brown jelly bacteria from what I hear. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had brown jelly in a while, but usually it's something that happened on a new frag. If something just came in, I've seen it, or it wasn't happy in shipping, but I haven't seen it just happen in quite a while personally. But Connor, hi Greg. I haven't gotten around to actually setting it up, but Mastertronic Hydro, so I can do dynamic dosing. Keep that level really lanthium. Ah, that's interesting. So you're dosing based off the Mastertronics phosphate result. That's kind of cool. I have a buddy that doses lanthium phosphate E on a regular basis, and he basically just doesn't like refugiums. He just doses Nopox and lanthium phosphate E to control his stuff. So definitely one way to do it. Yeah, Kung Fu Corals, that's who it was. So I was talking to him, so may have him on to talk about that on a future stream, which should be a good one. Yeah, so if you don't have fish in the tank, letting your tank sit fishless for that 78 days is your best bet to make sure it's died off. But yeah, ick management, UV, feed well, make sure there's no stress. Definitely agree on that one. What about lanthium for phosphate? So phosphate E or lanthium chloride, I have used it. It definitely does work. The one thing to note is don't dose too much too fast. Definitely go slow with it. I have heard issues of potentially like some tanks not faring as well because of the small particulates. So if you're going to do it, dose it through a filter suck, and finer the particulates, the better. Now I know some people that will dose it into a skimmer cup. If you dose it through the lid, that way it basically binds the phosphates in the skimmer tower and goes to the cup. Or if you dose it through a filter roller or something, it's going to catch those particulates of the phosphates that bind up and remove it, rather than it floating through your system. Hey Dev, do you dose reefroids? I switched to benefits. The phosphate difference is insane. Corals seem to react to reefroids better, but that's PO4. So yeah, you definitely do get some PO4 in reefroids. It does work well though. I mean, it's definitely a trade-off. So it really depends on your nutrients levels. I don't use it all the time, but I do randomly use it. Now, a lot of people struggle with low nutrients. I mean, that's a huge benefit for reefroids. It depends on your situation, right? TMRV style, 310 gallon, 3.1 phosphates. Woo, 3.1. That's so much. Scared of this type of stuff. Maybe a good idea. SPS still grow. Honestly, if your corals are happy and they're looking good, don't worry about it too much. I mean, if you do want to do it, just go slow, right? The biggest thing is you don't want to shock your corals from, you know, being super high to nothing all of a sudden, right? That will stress them out. Again, if you do want to get them down, just slowly knock them down over time. Tire and Dev, I'm gonna pull the fish and do the 70-day thing. Now, yeah, that will definitely eliminate it from the system. But the other big thing is if a fish is stressed, it is going to have a weaker immune system and it's more likely to be affected by things. So if you're putting them in a quarantine tank, I see lots of people to do a bare bones tank for a quarantine tank. Like, go buy some 3 or 4 inch PVC fittings, make some little tunnels, make some little hidey holes, and the fish is going to be less stressed and fare better as well. Always drives me nuts when I see a quarantine tank with nothing in it. Like, you got to let the fish feel comfortable and not stress them out more. So go buy some PVC fittings, big ones. They'll be happier. Port Wolf was talking about, Chris mentioned about his torches and moving corals between halides and LAD. Yeah, he was theorizing with some of the UV from the lighting that had an effect on it. Yeah, Watchmen Goby, any gobies are a challenge to get out for the most part. Biofuel tribe for newbies. Make sure you smash that like button. Thanks, Connor. Much appreciated. Thanks, Greg. All right, guys, we're at 5. I'm gonna do about 10 more minutes, and then I do have to run to go take one of my students to an appointment. So if you guys got any other burning questions, make sure to let me know before I go. Did you prep your NO3 brick with Microbacter 7? I have on some. If it's an established tank that's running, I won't worry about it as much. I'll just throw it in there. I do need an ATO on that. You're correct. If it is a brand new tank where I'm putting a brick onto, then I'd want to pre-seed it with bacteria. Either Microbacter Quickstart XLM or Microbacter 7 I've used in the past. I've also used the first one in the past. I've used a few different ones, but basically, brand new tank, I would take that rock, everything, and kind of pre-seed it. Now, you'll get a bit more bang for your buck by pre-seeding it. If you add it to your tank, it will still do its job, but it might just take a few weeks for it to build up its own bacteria culture first, right? Rather than you inoculating it with, MB7 or something initially. So not required, but will speed it up. Now, another thing I use a lot of time, those bricks are amazing for starting new tanks. If you have, like for this tank, for instance, I had a bunch of bricks in my big tank I put in a month or two beforehand, so they get stocked up with like all the good bacteria from my water box. That way, when I put in all new rock in this tank, I can move all those bricks over, and it has all that bacteria from my higher fish load to basically bring this new tank up to speed. So it's a really good way to transfer bacteria from tank to tank too. Greg, funny how people act like we didn't have coral issues when we had metal halide lighting, short memory. Yeah, I mean, every light's gonna grow coral. Some might grow better, some might look better, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're still gonna grow things, right? It's like one might have a bit better color, one might have a bit better this. One's hotter, one's less heat. So it's all a trade-off. But Brinks, hit that thumbs up. 94 watching, only 41 thumbs up. You 50-something slackers. Hit that thumbs up if you guys enjoy it. Jared, I want to start using 2-part. I'm currently dosing 24 mils elk, 50 mils of kelp, which keeps the tank stable. How can I start dosing 2-part? It says you already are dosing 2-part. Okay, by adding 24 mils of elk and 50 mils of kelp, you are dosing 2-part, so you're already there. I'm assuming you want to put on a doser is what I'm guessing. In that case, basically just punch those numbers into a doser. A lot of people ask about, do you have to dose them equally? I mean, that just proves it right there. You have to dose more elk than calcium in your tank, and my tanks have always been the same. I've never gotten away with dosing equal 2-part. I've always had to dose more elk than calcium, and again, you're not going to know that unless you test. So Jared, you're already dosing 2-parts. Congratulations. I think I might add a brick, make the move to easier at the sand bed. Now, yeah, so the bricks, if you're taking away a sand bed, you should 100% add some of those media bricks, because that is going to help make up for that surface area. So sand is a tremendous amount of surface area. Every one of those little granules is, 360 degrees of surface area, and people in bare bottom lose a lot of that surface area. So that definitely has a lot of benefit to add those media bricks. Got a Micromusa, but give me a bit of trouble. Not dying, just not puffy, low flow, low light, holding crazy color still. Excellent water parameters. So with Micromusa, aka Acan Lords, I find they do very well by feeding them. So make sure you spot feed that guy once or twice a week, and he will have better coloration and probably be happier. Giovanni, would you say it's okay to put 150 watt metal halide over an 18-inch cube SPS dominant mixed reef, and the Radion G5X isn't cutting it par-wise? Dude, over an 18-inch cube, a Radion G5 should be overkill, and a halide is even more overkill. I don't know how much fire you're trying to pull, but for a 24-gallon tank, either one of those are way more than enough. You can do it. You're gonna have heat. You're probably gonna have to deal with heat issues, though. Just throwing that out there. Personally, I would just keep the radio on. But Craig, Carol, I want to hear those problems. Get them, Devin. Craig, you should come on one day. Actually, it's been a while since I've had you on. I have a 200 gallon bare bottom, so it's a great idea. Thanks, Dev. No problem. Happy to help. But yeah, so it's always that big bare bottom versus sand debate. Sand does trap fish poop over time. It can be a nutrient issue if you never clean your sand bed. So if you have a sand bed, you have to maintain it. Now, on the flip side, sand helps buffer your tank, so you're less likely to deal with bacterial blooms and other stuff with the sand. It's gonna help buffer your elk a bit more too, right? So you might not have as many swings. Like, there's a lot of good with sand, but it does need to be maintained once in a while. That being said, I have not vacuumed the sand bed yet. One day I probably should. It's probably going to be a bit of a pain with how much rock I put in there because I have this crazy structure. So in that case, I should probably add more sand sifters, whether Astrina. I do have a couple conch snails in there, but I'll probably get some more sand sifting, maybe some sand cleaner fish, and get some little creatures to help maintain it for me. So, considerations, right? Abraham, what pumps do you use for flow on your peninsula? My return pump is L2 pump, and my power heads are 2 MP60s. Originally I was going to use MP40s, but I didn't want pumps anywhere else on it, so I went for the big boys. So I have 2 MP60s at a fairly high percent, and it works pretty dang well, because so far, one day it might change, but so far, full tank is great for not having any pumps visible, which I absolutely love that aspect of it. Now I'm just curious what percent I have them at, so I'm just going to check. Once it connects, what's your favorite invertebrate? That's a tough one. Love the rock skate, tons of rock in mine too. Excellent. Okay, so right now the MP60, 7,300 gallons per hour, so lots of flow. But again, I only have 2 pumps pushing that whole 6 feet. So it's a big consideration. I really, really, really didn't want pumps anywhere else on the tank. If I was brave enough to drill a hole in the bottom, I might have did a closed loop, but I don't know. I'm always scared of putting holes in the bottom. So 70% is what I'm running the MP60s at. Are you running UV? Considered setting one up again on a variable flow pump, Varios, and a wave engine. Get the best of both worlds. I do have UV. So, Connor, I actually was beta testing one of the Coral UVs, so I have one of the smaller ones, slightly undersized for this tank, but I do have, I think it's only a 25 watt, but I have one on this tank, and I have a 55 watt UV on the water box. Justin, would you recommend turning up the intensity on the radions or adding something like a Reef Bright XHO? Personal preference, it depends what you're trying to accomplish and what gen your radions are. If you're after just a little fill or color pop, XHOs work very well for that. If you're after more power, I would just turn up the slider personally. Do I have any issues with humidity in my office? I installed an air exchanger in the house last year, and that has made a huge difference. It used to be more like 55%-ish, now it's more like 40%, 35, 40%. So that's made a really big difference. Now, it's summertime, I leave my window open a lot, so I am good now, but it is definitely more humid in my office because it's a smaller space. If I leave my office door open, it's not bad at all, but if it's closed for a while, like when I'm streaming for a couple hours, then I'll definitely feel a little more warm and humid in here for sure, especially with the computer running and processing all the streaming stuff. Salty Dad, looking for a 300 gallon Peninsula tank. Any pointers on what to consider? Dimensions, armored corners. I have never had armored corners, but I love that idea of that. Dimensions. I like the front to back depth a lot, and my water box is 25. If I was to do it again, I'd probably do a 30-inch wide tank if you could do it. That extra bit of depth would be super cool. So it really depends on what fits your space though. It really depends. If you fit like a big cube, if you have, the space for a big long peninsula, like it really depends what suits your home, what suits your space. Like this tank, for instance, was basically as big as I could get into the office. Now, there was about a foot gap, and that's partially because if it was any longer, I wouldn't be able to fit the stand in. So it was basically as big as I could sneak into here and fit. But Randy's 6-foot flow pack was going to go at 2 MB60s. We want to integrate some gyres. gyres do work well. They're cool because they do kind of that sheet of flow. You can have it close to the surface. The only complaint that I have is they're usually a bit of a pain to clean them, and they require more maintenance. But if you're fine with that, then I mean, they're good options as well. Sammy, flower advice. Just received 2 dozen of them. Heck yeah, 2 dozen rock flowers. Loved it. Rock flowers, super cool. They are super easy, and there is like nothing special for them. I have a couple in here. I do nothing special. If you want to try and breed them, you know, feed them once or twice a week. That will help. You could add some phyto if you want, not required. But again, if you want to try and get them to breed, I do find it is more, I don't know if it's like full moon based or spring or fall, but it does seem to be somewhat seasonal. But again, same thing, a lot of corals, you feed them, they'll be happier and you're more likely to get like a spawn. I hid in the car, the wife invaded TikTok at full volume. That happens to the best of us. Is your Mobius app Wi-Fi? If so, does everyone, am I missing something? Mine is yes. I have been beta testing it for many moons. Publicly, it's starting to be Wi-Fi from my understanding. They're randomly rolling it out to people and inviting them to those extra features. So I don't think it is across the board yet, but it's slowly working its way out into the world. So yes, I can control it from outside the house, which is pretty cool. In order for it to be Wi-Fi, I believe you need like a G5 Radeon, because that's kind of the bridge to the Wi-Fi to the rest of the gear. I don't believe it works with just like a Vortec or a Dose. I think you need to have a Radeon in order to bridge to the Wi-Fi, but if you do, and eventually that feature's unlocked for you, which is cool. So it's definitely pretty good. All right, guys, I am about 5:15. They can invite me anytime I like. You might be able to call them and ask. I know if you ask them, they're unlocking the ability to add AIs. So they're either randomly doing it, or if you ask really nicely, they might give it to you early. So never know. Just have to email them and give them your Mobius account. Just added my Nero 5s to Mobius. So I have not added my Neros. I need to do that. Definitely have to work on that one. Yeah, so it's basically their new features, and they didn't want to, my guess is they don't want to release it to everybody across the board, because then their customer service might just be inundated with a bazillion calls. Or if they do, you know, like, okay, 100 people today, another 100 people tomorrow, another 100 people tomorrow, it just staggers it so they're not like hammered with 1,000 asks at once. So I think that's likely why they're staggering the rollout of it. But yeah, they do have wicked customer service, so that's one reason I'm a big fan of like the AI Ecotech stuff. Is any issue I've had, they've been absolutely amazing. James, what is my Mastertronic schedule like? I test calcium, magnesium, nitrates, and phosphates every Friday morning. And there is elk in there. I don't really have a testing. I do it randomly just to check it, because I have the Alcatronic just for the odd spot check. And then I test my nitrates and phosphates on Tuesday. So nitrates and phosphates twice a week, and the rest of stuff once a week. Alright guys, I am going to wrap it up because I have to go take the kid to an appointment. But hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you did, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe. Fellow Reefer Brinks, Jeff, thank you guys for the super chat. Much appreciated. Bruno, thank you as well. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Probably do another one of the random QAs in another couple weeks, because they're fun. It's a good way to hopefully help a lot of you guys out in a short amount of time. Alright guys, thanks again for hanging out. I'll catch you guys on next week's stream.